Okay, today we live in a world of endless notifications, split-second reactions, and a constant pull toward more opinions, more validation, more noise. You might feel like your emotions are tugging at you from every direction, each one demanding your attention, while something quiet and deep within you just wants stillness, a place to rest, a space to simply be. Have you ever felt that? In that space, beyond the noise, lies a longing not for achievement or recognition, but for clarity and devotion, a longing to surrender without losing yourself, to care deeply, yet remain centered. Welcome to Stoic Dhamma space where ancient wisdom meets modern introspection. Here we slow down, to reflect, to feel, and to listen. In today's reflection, we journey into the union of two timeless paths, Bhakti, the way of sacred devotion, and Stoic Clarity, the still flame of reason and self-mastery. Together, they illuminate a path to inner peace, one that is both soft and unshakable. So take a breath. Let the world pause for a moment, and let's begin. Dawn unfolds gently along the horizon. The ocean breathes without demand, its waves rising and falling in quiet rhythm, each a reminder of something vast, untamed, and beyond the grasp of self. Above, the sky glows softly, not calling for attention, but simply existing. In this stillness, something stirs. A subtle invitation arises not from craving or ambition, but from something deeper. It is here, in the silence between breath and horizon, that the path of Bhakti quietly begins. Bhakti is not noise, performance, or obligation. It is not confined to rituals or rigid belief. At its essence, Bhakti is a sacred offering, a turning of the heart toward what is greater than the ego. Not because you need saving, but because you sense that devotion itself anchors you in a world that often moves faster than your soul can follow. It is the practice of living with your heart open and your attachments gently loosened, a thread connecting you to the sacred whether named God, the cosmos, or the mystery of being itself. Yet even devotion, when unexamined, can become entangled in desire, expectation, or emotional dependence. That is where Stoic clarity becomes essential. Stoicism does not reject emotion. It refines your relationship to it. It teaches discernment, what lies within your power and what must be surrendered. It doesn't harden the heart, but allows the mind to gently lead. When Bhakti's surrender is guided by Stoic wisdom, devotion becomes not just emotional release, but conscious alignment. Not blind faith, but grounded reverence. Together, they form a balanced path. Bhakti softens the self, Stoicism strengthens the center. In their union, devotion becomes clear, and clarity becomes compassionate. Imagine devotion offered with the detachment that Stoicism fosters. It would feel like holding a flame in your palm, warm, alive, radiant, but never scorching you, because you do not cling, you simply honor. This fusion, Bhakti's surrender melded with Stoic perception, softens the heart and sharpens the mind. Together they reveal a balance, a peace unshaken by the unpredictable tides of existence. Within Bhakti tradition, surrender is revered, but it can be misunderstood as weakness or blind hope. Stoic clarity, in turn, risks misinterpretation as emotional coldness, yet at their shared core lies a silent teaching. You are not your emotions. You stand apart. You observe them. You decide how to respond. Bhakti whispers, offer everything to the sacred. And Stoicism says, focus only on what you can control. Both paths converge on the practice of release, not from apathy, but from deep inner trust, one trusting divine rhythm, the other natural order. There is subtle strength in this way of being, to love not because you expect return, but because love aligns you with your higher nature, to serve not for applause, but because it frees you from self-centeredness. Devotion unguided can dissolve into obsession or dependency. Rational clarity without warmth can turn prideful or isolating. Yet when Bhakti is held within Stoic clarity, the result is a peace that is simultaneously tender and resolute. This balance is not theoretical. It is lived, a mindset recognizing sorrow and joy alike as temporary visitors, a heart inclined to bow deeply yet not fixated on the object of its reverence. When inner stillness flows into devotion, Bhakti becomes a quiet revolution. You are no longer driven by every surge of longing or the storms of emotion. You become a vessel hollow, yet radiant with light. The tools of Stoicism carve that vessel. They remind you that outcomes are not yours to manage, but your manner of presence surely is. And Bhakti adds, rive with love anyway. This integration is ancient, echoing across civilizations and sages. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor overseeing an empire, practiced nightly surrender to the flow of the cosmos. Mirabai, a Bhakti saint, renounced everything to offer love to a divine reality. Only she could perceive. They lived in different worlds, yet both learned the same lesson: release control and align with something greater than themselves. Pause now, not just to understand these words, but to truly feel their presence within you. Let them settle like morning mist over still water. Ask yourself gently, is there something in your life that you are gripping too tightly? Perhaps it's an unspoken grief, a goal that's become a burden, or an identity so tightly held that it no longer breathes. These things are subtle, but powerful. We often carry them not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of becoming empty. But what if that emptiness isn't something to fear but to trust? Attachment binds us in invisible ways. It narrows our perspective and exhausts the heart. And yet, letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means offering to something wiser, something deeper. This is the essence of bhakti, to offer all that we carry, not to escape responsibility, but to recognize that we are not meant to carry everything alone. At the same time, Stoic clarity enters not to push emotions away, but to help us hold them rightly. Stoicism teaches us to observe, to discern, to surrender control not out of defeat, but out of wisdom. It reminds us that peace isn't found by chasing outcomes, it's found in how we show up and how we let go. So hold this reflection gently. What would it feel like to live in full devotion, yet without clinging? To love with your whole being, while staying rooted in stillness? These aren't questions to answer once and be done with. They are doorways into lifelong practice. They ask not for perfection, but for presence. They ask you to live awake, to make each gesture, each decision, each moment an offering. And from this space of honesty and quiet strength, we now turn to the beginning, to the ancient soil where both bhakti and stoicism first took root. Across language, lineage, and time, humanity has always asked, how do we find freedom in a world we cannot control? Let's travel back, not just in geography, but in time. Long before algorithms shaped our attention spans, humanity turned toward something older, something sacred, a stillness deeper than information, a yearning broader than survival. In that ancient space, to paths emerged bhakti and stoicism, born worlds apart, yet echoing with the same longing. We begin in ancient India, along the rivers of the Indus Valley. These waters carried more than silt and fish, they carried prayers. Whispered chants and sacred hymns drifted through forests, toward unseen deities and timeless truths. From these spiritual currents, a deeply emotional, soul-stirring practice was born: bhakti. Bhakti did not originate in ornate temples. It was born in the heart through longing, poetry, music, and surrender. The Vedas, the Upanishads, and later, the Bhagavad Gita shaped its theology. But even before the scriptures, bhakti was a movement of the soul, a deep, personal call to love. The Bhagavad Gita introduced a profound idea: you can reach the divine not only through knowledge, jnana, or action karma, but through devotion. Bhakti, love itself, became a sacred path, not a weakness, but a strength, not dependency, but full-hearted surrender to something beyond ego. Saints like Ramanuja, Kabir, and Mirabai lived this path with burning sincerity. Mirabai, especially, abandoned her royal life to wander, singing songs to Krishna. Her verses were not theological arguments. They were raw yearning, divine madness, offering her entire self. Without bargaining, her love was both fierce and freeing. Bhakti was never about blind faith. It was about choosing to open your heart fully, not to be rescued, but to live from reverence, not to gain control, but to offer control. It was not worship out of fear, but love out of trust, a sacred vulnerability. Now, shift continents, cross deserts, cross time. We arrive in ancient Greece, then into Rome. Here, another tradition is forming, one not of chanting, but of contemplation, not of surrender to gods, but of aligning with nature. This is the birthplace of Stoicism. Zeno of Citium, shipwrecked and exiled, began this tradition. His teachings were taken up by Epictetus, a former slave who taught that true freedom lies in realizing what belongs to you, your thoughts, your choices. Seneca wrote about virtue and death. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, turned his diary into a moral mirror. Stoicism was not cold, despite its reputation. It was precise. It taught, control what you can, accept what you can't, don't be ruled by fear, pleasure, or praise. Cultivate reason. Live in harmony with nature. It offered not escape from life but deeper engagement with reality. Its aim wasn't detachment, but mastery of perception. To be Stoic wasn't to feel less, it was to react less, to understand before responding, to grieve without collapsing, to rejoice without clutching. A path not of withdrawal, but of inner steadiness. On the surface, Bhakti and Stoicism seem to live on opposite shores. Bhakti sings with emotion. Stoicism stands with reason. One bows in love, the other reflects in silence. But look deeper, and a quiet symmetry begins to emerge. Both paths seek the same truth. Both traditions arise from the ache to transcend suffering, to live meaningfully in a world we cannot control. Bhakti teaches, you are not the doer. Surrender the fruits of your action. Stoicism teaches, outcomes are not yours. Act well and let go. Bhakti whispers, trust the divine will. Stoicism answers, trust the natural order. One dissolves the ego through love. The other refines it through reason. Yet both lead us away from fear, entitlement, and false identity. Both show us how to let go. The Bhagavad Gita tells the story of Arjuna. Standing at the edge of battle, frozen in moral confusion, Krishna doesn't demand blind obedience. He speaks of dharma duty without attachment. Fight, he says, not for reward, but as a sacred act. This is Bhakti guided by clarity. It mirrors what Marcus Aurelius did in Rome, night after night. He wrote reminders to himself not to impress or control, but to remain just, humble, clear, not to seek applause, but to fulfill his role in the larger cosmic order. Duty over desire. Bhakti and Stoicism, though born of different soil, echo the same message. Be present. Do your part. Let go. You cannot control life, but you can shape your response. Your inner freedom begins not in conquering the world, but in ceasing to be conquered by it. But what happens when we bring Bhakti and Stoicism into the same breath? Something rare, something grounded. Bhakti alone can become emotional dependence. Stoicism alone can become emotional suppression, but together, they become a devotion that is wise and free. This union teaches us how to love without clinging, how to act without demanding, how to serve without pride, how to rest without fear. In practice, Bhakti says give it all. Stoicism says expect nothing, and somehow, that paradox unlocks peace. Think of it like two hands. One hand offers open, trembling, full of love. The other releases steady, clear, detached. Together, they express a whole heart, not fragmented, not afraid, not needing life to meet a script, just alive to what is. Bhakti keeps Stoicism from becoming brittle. Stoicism keeps Bhakti from dissolving into chaos. Their marriage is not compromise, it is a deepening, a balanced flame. Together, they reflect the teaching of karma yoga, act with devotion, unattached to results. The Stoic ideal of eudaimonia speaks of a life aligned with nature and guided by virtue, of flourishing grounded in wisdom. Neither Bhakti nor Stoicism denies emotion or reason. Instead, they reveal both as essential tools. True wisdom is not just knowing the truth, but living it. In grief, Bhakti offers a sacred space to cry. Stoicism offers breath and perspective. In beauty, Bhakti invites praise. Stoicism whispers, this too shall pass. In daily life, Bhakti says, serve with all your heart. Stoicism adds, and let go of the outcome. Now, we stand with one foot in ancient India and one in ancient Rome. To cultures, one human longing, not for control, but for peace that cannot be shaken by circumstance. That peace is born not from grasping, but from trusting, whether in dharma, logos, or truth itself. To live Bhakti with Stoic clarity is to love freely, act wisely, and walk inward. That is where the path truly begins. You rise before the world stirs, and in that stillness, you light a candle, not for applause, not to perform, but to honor a quiet space before life begins to move. This simple act holds meaning not because others see it, but because you choose it. You mark the day not with urgency, but with intention. Bhakti, at its core, isn't a feeling you wait for, it's a discipline you live. It is devotion without expectation, especially when life is silent and no one is watching. It's showing up each day not because it feels sacred, but because doing so slowly makes life sacred. Practice, not performance, creates transformation. Stoicism, too, is not about inspiration, it's about commitment. It tells you to show up even when motivation fades, especially on dull mornings, when ego is quiet and effort is unseen. This is where character is shaped, where philosophy stops being abstract and becomes a living reality, rooted in daily rhythm. Wisdom is not meant to remain in theory. Bhakti and Stoicism are not distant ideals but embodied postures. They shape how we act, how we speak, and how we show up, not through grand gestures, but through quiet consistency. This is where the soul finds its strength and the mind its clarity. Work is a crucible for these ideas. It consumes our energy and often tempts the ego to equate value with output. In this space, Bhakti offers a gentle challenge. Can you act without needing reward? Can each task, mundane or demanding, become an offering, not a transaction? Writing reports, cleaning dishes, or replying to emails can shift from burdens to devotion when intention changes. This is Karma Yoga, the Gita's teaching of detached action. You give your best not for praise, but because it is your practice. You serve not for applause, but for alignment. Then Stoicism adds its clarity. It reminds you, your domain is effort, not result. You cannot control response, outcome, or recognition, but you can control your ethics, your presence, and your process. When that's your anchor, work becomes a site of freedom, not entanglement. Freedom, here, does not mean detachment from responsibility. It means freedom from the inner turbulence of needing results. To validate your worth, you act fully. Then, you release what follows, not out of apathy, but peace. You surrender the fruit, and in that, you reclaim your calm. In relationships, these traditions meet deeper challenges. Emotions are rich, layered, and often fueled by longing. The need to be seen, to be loved, to be needed can slide into subtle forms of dependency. Bhakti urges us to love not as possession, but as reverence. To see the divine in another is to honor them, not to mold or fix them. Relationships then become sacred offerings, not means for self-validation. When you love this way, connection flows. It's not control disguised as carrots, presence shaped by reverence. Stoicism walks beside this with its own wisdom. It asks if our love is truly for the person or for the version we wish they would become. It challenges us to meet life and love without illusion. Amor fati, love of fate, is the radical acceptance of life as it is, not as we imagine. In Bhakti, this is mirrored in Ishvara Pranadhana, surrendering one's will to the divine. This surrender is not passivity, it's active attentiveness. It's choosing compassion over control, listening over fixing. Love becomes less about holding tightly and more about holding truthfully. When relationships shift or even end, you are not shattered because your peace was never rooted in their permanence. You built your steadiness not on circumstances, but on disciplined love and clear awareness. You gave your heart, but you didn't lose your center. The deepest field of devotion, however, is the inner world, the space of thoughts, fears, and the quiet voice of self-judgment. Bhakti offers sweetness here. It says, you are not alone. Even in pain, you are held. Even in confusion, you are still connected to what is sacred. And where Bhakti offers comfort, Stoicism offers discernment. It teaches the discipline of mental clarity. You learn to name your emotions without letting them rule you. This is anger, not truth. This is fear, not prophecy. This is praise, not proof of worth. This clarity is not repression, it's sovereignty. As Epictetus said, you cannot control what happens, but you can control how you respond. This is where Bhakti and Stoicism become allies. One gives you warmth, the other gives you wisdom. Together, they guide you back to center. Each day, this balance becomes a rhythm. In the quiet of morning, you may light a candle not to empty your mind, but to remember your intention. This day is not yours to possess. It is yours to meet with care, with courage, and with quiet devotion. A daily practice naturally emerges from the integration of Bhakti and Stoicism. You might begin by journaling, gently writing down your fears, desires, and attachments, not to analyze or judge, but to see them clearly. Over time, this practice becomes a mirror, revealing the mind's patterns and guiding it toward peace. Simple Bhakti rituals like chanting a sacred name, lighting a candle, or repeating a mantra are not acts of superstition. They serve as anchors, reminding you that you are part of something greater. They root your identity not in ego, but in reverence and surrender. You might start each morning with a quiet intention. Let me serve today not to be seen, but to be sincere. Follow this with a Stoic inquiry. What is within my control? What is not? These small acts center your awareness and shape your presence throughout the day. At times, visualize losing what you cherish, not to invite fear, but to cultivate gratitude. Then, in prayer, offer it with humility. If I lose this, may I still love. If I keep it, may I not cling. This is the essence of surrender, deep trust beyond possession. Perfection is not the aim, awareness is. Some days, devotion may feel dry and discipline difficult. Still, the path remains. The more you walk it, the more it remembers you. Peace becomes embodied. Those who embody peace don't grasp for recognition. Their strength lies in presence, not control. This is the fruit of living Bhakti with Stoic clarity, a grounded, devoted life. Not separate philosophies, but one rhythm, a way of being, a daily return to what matters most. In the quiet folds of an ordinary day, perhaps while brushing your teeth, waiting at a red light, or cradling a warm cup of tea, you may sense a flicker beneath the noise. A gentle reminder emerges. Life is not simply a string of tasks to complete, but a sacred rhythm quietly unfolding beneath it all. Each breath offers a choice, not just to react to what appears, but to return to stillness, return to meaning, return to the center of what you love most deeply without clinging. It is in these quiet returns that Bhakti and Stoicism softly meet, not in ancient temples or grand philosophies, but in the fabric of daily life. In the way of Bhakti, devotion becomes a lens rather than a ritual. It invites you to see the divine, not just in sacred objects, but in every face, in every frustration, and in each fleeting, beautiful moment. Even when life resists your plans, Bhakti asks, can love still remain? In Stoicism, the question arises in a different form but with a similar spirit. It asks whether you can remain anchored as life shifts unpredictably, whether your actions arise from principle, not emotion, whether your peace is built on clarity rather than circumstance. Stoicism calls for inner steadiness. Together, Bhakti and Stoicism ask a deeper question. Can you love what is without being ruled by it? This question turns daily life into a spiritual field. Modern life often rewards control and optimization, but these paths teach something gentler and truer, that peace is not found in mastery, but in surrender and clarity combined. Bhakti reminds you that devotion is not limited to religious moments. It thrives in presence. It appears in the way you speak kindly, offer your attention fully, or accept uncertainty without bitterness. Stoicism reinforces this by offering the clarity to act consciously, even when feelings run strong. When both are practiced together, they do not weaken each other, they strengthen each other. One softens the heart, the other sharpens the mind. One brings reverence, the other brings discernment. They become two wings of the same inward movement toward freedom. In the rhythm of an ordinary day, conflict inevitably rises. A colleague may dismiss your input, a friend may disappoint, or a long-prepared plan may unravel. Bhakti encourages the heart to stay soft in these moments, not to be passive, but to keep love flowing without turning into defense or blame. At the same time, Stoicism grounds the mind in truth. It reminds you what lies within your control and what does not. While emotion may rise, clarity becomes your anchor. You recognize the situation for what it is and respond, rather than react. Grace emerges not as denial, but as dignity. Joy, too, rives. A kind word, a success, or a tender connection may brighten your day. Bhakti opens the heart to gratitude, encouraging you to savor the fullness of that joy. You feel the sacredness in the moment, not in theory, but in the pulse of lived presence. Yet Stoicism speaks here as well. It gently reminds you of impermanence, that even beautiful things pass, and that the point is not to possess joy, but to participate in it. You let the moment rise, and then let it go like a breath, like a wave, like a blessing freely given. This shared rhythm of bowing the heart and lifting the mind becomes a way of living. It is not loud or dramatic, but sincere and consistent. It requires no audience, just the willingness to return, again and again, to what is true and whole within you. Subtle questions guide this path. You might begin to notice, before you act or speak, whether your intention is coming from love or fear. Fear defends, love connects. Bhakti nurtures love. Stoicism identifies fear without being overwhelmed by it. Together, they create clarity. Another question may rise in moments of tension or effort. Are you trying to control or trying to serve? Control hardens, service softens. Bhakti reminds you to offer, not grasp. Stoicism reminds you to remain focused on the effort, not the outcome. Together, they reveal how freedom often comes from letting go. As the day unfolds, you may ask yourself what you can release, even as you continue showing up fully. This is the paradox both traditions embrace: to care deeply without attachment, to act with sincerity but without expectation. Over time, this becomes a habit, not a rule, but a rhythm of the soul. These quiet questions become steady companions. They do not ask for perfection. They gently guide you back to the breath, to the present moment, to the stillness beneath the surface. They remind you of who you are when you're not performing, fixing, or defending, but simply being. Seen from a wider lens, this practice becomes more than personal healing. It becomes a way of showing up in the world, in a time of noise, division, and overwhelm. Bhakti and Stoicism offer a radical alternative: presence, to love without clinging, to think without reacting, to act without grasping. This presence doesn't solve every problem, nor does it promise certainty, but it creates space to respond with grace instead of panic. It helps you stay steady when the world is loud. You no longer need to manage everything or everyone. You simply stand, quiet, and real. Think of those you admire not for what they've done, but for how they are. There's a calm in them that isn't passive, it's alive. They don't shrink under pressure or chase attention. Their hearts remain open, and their presence grounded. That is the fragrance of a Bhakti Stoic life. It's a way of being that meets the storm without becoming it, a way of walking through rain with peace still intact. Eventually, the questions return. Can I love without grasping, offer without needing, devote without losing myself? When love becomes discerning and clarity becomes warm, peace stops being something you seek, it becomes something you live from. You return, not to a theory, but to a way that honors mornings, deepens conversations, and softens forgetfulness. You're not failing, you're remembering. When devotion flows through the heart and clarity anchors the mind, peace is no longer something you seek, it quietly rises from within. Fulfillment stops depending on outcomes. It becomes a state you live from, not chase. Surrender, when guided by wisdom, is not defeat, it's strength. This is the liberation known by both Bhakti saints and Stoic sages. That life isn't meant to be controlled or feared, but consciously loved. Bhakti opens the heart with courage. Stoicism grounds the mind with discernment. Together, they offer a compass not to escape the world, but to walk through it with calm, clarity, and quiet power. If this reflection speaks to something within you, subscribe to Stoic Dhamma, where ancient wisdom meets a modern heart. Share your thoughts. What does devotion mean to you when guided by clarity? And if someone you love needs peace today, send this their way.
References 1. Aurelius, M. 2006. Meditations, G. Hayes, trans. Modern Library. Point 2. Iswaran, E. 2007. The Bhagavad Gita for Daily Living. Nilgiri Press. Point 3. Long, A. A. 2002. Epictetus, A Stoic and Socratic Guide to Life. Oxford University Press.